Hello, I'm Bob Ganzak, and this is MotivationU the Podcast. Hello, I'm Bob Ganzak, and this is MotivationU the Podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill inside the Coach's Podcast room here at Celebration Point, Gainesville, Florida. Before we get to our guest today, I want to mention a couple of things that we have coming up as far as the Dale Carnegie world is concerned. We have a class in Gainesville that is kicking off on April 26th, I believe it is. Yes, it is. April 26th. 8 weeks over here at Hotel Indigo at Celebration Point. Please go to jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com, sign up, and join us. We also have one that is still on the schedule for Lake City, though later on today or tomorrow I may change that date. Right now it's scheduled to start April 18th. I may have to move that one back because of another scheduling conflict that I have in May. So, but you can go there to jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com and find that one also. Today, I have a wonderful guest that I met a few weeks ago and came out to our graduation, Miss Vicki Guy. Vicki, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bob.
Glad you are here. Vicki has a company called Essential Training Concepts, LLC. By the way, yes. What is Essential Training Concepts?
Well, it's essential, really. What it is training and development, focus on leadership development for individuals, for companies, similar to what you do, and focus really on just helping people gain the tools and the skills and the resources they need to just be the best version of themselves.
You know what I've really enjoyed getting to know you since Freddie introduced us a few weeks ago is that our quote-unquote, to talk about Simon Sinek right for a second, our why is extremely the same. We both want to help people in the leadership world or to help them develop the skills to become a leader, which I find really fascinating that two different paths to get there. How did you get onto this role of leadership?
Sure. So kind of by accident. I started out my career, well, the first half of my career in the business world, in sales and in sales management. And one day, the VP of sales tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, why don't you move to New York and join us? We're building a team that is going to help others in the organization learn how to be leaders. And Bob, I looked at him and I said, I'm not a trainer. Like, what are you talking about? But long story short, I said yes, moved to New York, started on a team building leadership development capabilities within the pharmaceutical industry. And we built our internal university with zero resources, zero budget, kind of bootstrapping the whole thing. So really self-taught. And I fell in love with the ability to sit in a room with really smart people that were leading teams and help them connect the dots on what makes people tick and what motivates people to do things and how to drive success. So I was hooked immediately. And so since then, that was, well, I won't even tell you the year because that will age me. But since then, I have really just, that's my passion. It's been a passion of mine just to be in an arena where I can help people grow and develop to be the best them.
That's interesting. Now, listening to you share that story, I pulled one part out of that, which those of us that are not in the medical world or in the pharmaceutical world think that pharma companies have billions and billions and billions of dollars that they just waste, that they just spend. But for leadership, you had to go ahead and build it from scratch without a budget. Mm-hmm. Why is that?
Mm-hmm. Well, at the time, the company that I worked for was a little bit of a smaller company and did not have necessarily the budget at the time to be able to dedicate to leadership development. However, the leadership of the company knew the importance of it. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to free up some internal resources to be able to figure it out. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that many companies in a lot of different industries now do carve out those budgets and spend a lot of money in this area because talent development is, it can make or break a company for sure.
We're struggling with that, and hopefully as we go throughout this program today, we can discuss some of that because I see many challenges. One is companies can't hire people. They can't get them to want to work. Mm-hmm. So the people that are left over need to do more, and we're expecting them to do more, to take on more responsibilities, yet we're not giving them the training to be able to take on those added responsibilities because we're cutting budgets and I see the workforce just, struggling stress-wise because of that. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, I'd like to come back to that.
Good.
That's a good topic.
Well, you remind me, okay, so I don't forget. Because I want to get, where did the world start for you? Geographically, where'd you grow up? How'd you get to Gainesville, Florida?
Sure. Well, I'm a Florida girl. I grew up in a small town called Dunedin, which is on the west coast of Florida by Clearwater, Tampa area. While I was growing up, it was a sleepy little town, and now apparently it's not. Everybody wants to go there, and now it's a bit more commercialized, but still has maintained a small town feel to it. But I came to Gainesville for the University of Florida, and I ended up staying here. I left 3 times, and I've come back each time. So apparently I'm supposed to be in Gainesville. That's obviously my path. But now I really enjoy the community here. I enjoy, it's a great place to live for a number of reasons. So I'm here to stay.
So when you were in Dunedin, you went to high school there, and
Yep.
What were some of your first concepts of leadership? Who are the people that influenced you in those formidable years that kind of built who you are as a leader?
That's a pretty tough question. I would have to say
that's why I asked.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I am trying to think of, I just did a keynote talk, and I talked about some of these topics, and I'll just share with you a couple of personal stories. One is I always wanted to be a teacher, and I think it was my teachers that were my role models in terms of,
many of us, yes.
That kind of got me interested in just holding court, I guess I'd say, having discussions with people and asking questions and pulling information and making the dots connect, so to speak. And then I think also just my family dynamics. There were a lot of lessons that we learned in my family that at the time I didn't realize that were valuable in leadership. One of the things, growing up, we were pretty poor, actually. And so my dad, there was this exercise, we had to roll our pennies in order to get a swimming pool. And now he obviously was saving money to get a swimming pool on the side, but to make sure that we put in the work to be able to appreciate it and create value out of it, he had us roll pennies. And it sounds weird today, like, kids, you're going to roll pennies, but it taught us that work ethic is really important. Yep. It taught us how to value the things that we care about. And it taught us to appreciate what we have. And I think those are all really valuable lessons in leadership.
What an amazing thing to just say rolling pennies, because kids nowadays don't know what rolling pennies is. We take our change to a machine, we drop it in, and it counts it all for us. Yeah. What we used to have to do is put those 100 pennies into, or 50 pennies into a little finger-size piece of paper and drop them in there. And what was cool about that is the banks trusted that we put 50 in there.
There was always 50 in there. That's right.
and you didn't think about that, but that's what rolling pennies is. Now, for people that live outside of Florida, that are not familiar with the state of Florida, Dunedin is where, and when you said it's a small, sleepy town, tell me about that as far as where its locale is.
Sure. So Dunedin is about 30 minutes west of Tampa. So kind of right in the middle of the state, right on the water. It's a beach town. So it is, I grew up going to the beach pretty much every weekend or being somewhere near the beach every single weekend. But it wasn't a party town. It was, very family oriented. A lot of people came there from the north to retire as well. So it's got quite an older population in the retirement community. And so over the years, there's been a pretty significant influx of people coming from the north and other parts of Florida even to buy places on the water and to build their businesses. So it's definitely growing. A lot of good breweries are in Dunedin, but it's now known for a nice nature trail, some downtown art festivals that happen pretty much every weekend, great live music, the breweries. So we go there to visit. And
you still go back?
I sure do. My mom still lives there. My sisters still live in the area as well.
Well, you and I had talked about Dunedin earlier on when you had told me that's where you're from. And when I first started coming to Florida from Michigan, as we mentioned, I-75 wasn't finished down through here. So we had to hop on to 19 and cut down through. And it was, I always, all of those, I don't know the order that they go in, any Homosassa, Newport Richey, Dunedin. Getting to Clearwater Beach was our goal.
Right.
That's where we were going. And it was just like, I loved that part. I've always loved that part of Florida. The Gulf Coast, those sleepy little towns. Even Clearwater used to be a sleepy little town. Clearwater Beach, that is. It used to be a sleepy little town, but a lot of change we've seen.
It has changed. I do remember when I was in high school, when we would go to the beach for the weekend, Pier 60 was the main pier in Clearwater Beach.
Pier 60, yeah.
And if you were in high school, you went to the left side of the pier. And then when you graduated high school, you could go to the right side of the pier.
Oh.
So there was this internal culture around where you go on the beach, depending on how old you were.
We were tourists, so we always stayed on the left side. Although we stayed at the same hotel, and it's still there. It's like one of the 2 or 3 of those little mom and pop hotels that are left on Clearwater Beach. It was called the Traveler, and it's on 408. Now I'm going to give you a little test here. 408 East Shore Drive or East Shore Boulevard. I still remember the address. I mean, amazing to myself about that. But it's just 12 units, small little place. And I would go at night to Big Pier 60 as the youngest kid in the family and the only boy, and I'd watch the people shark fish and how they used to put their bait in a cardboard box, and they had it tied to a piece of string, and then the tide would take the cardboard box out, and then they would pull the string, and their bait would fall to the ground. And when somebody hooked a big shark, I would run back to the hotel so that my dad could come back and watch, because he didn't like to stand on the pier and sit there and watch everybody fish.
I can't say that I've ever done that.
Oh, it's a long time ago, but I mean, it was incredible. Just those are those. So living in Dunedin was how you kind of shaped your thought process. What made you come to UF?
Well, Dunedin was a really sleepy town. And I wanted to just get out into what I thought was a bigger town. And it was interesting, when I came to Gainesville, there were cows on the side of the road. And I thought, whoa, this is not bigger, this is different. And so still a small town at that point, and pretty quiet outside of the university. But, it was a great place to go to school, got a great education here, and the community here has definitely grown since then to a much bigger place.
And still growing.
Yes.
I mean, on a daily basis. Yeah. I mean, you can almost hear the seams expanding on a daily basis. What did you study, and what was your thought process going in as career path?
So I told you I wanted to be a teacher. Although growing up poor, and this is going to sound terrible, but good intentions here, I wanted to make more money than being a teacher. So I thought, well, I'll be a speech therapist. And so I could still teach people patient care, and they do make a little bit more money than teachers, I think. Today I have no idea. However, I decided to go into speech therapy as a study. I graduated. I got a job in Ocala, right down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't love it. I loved the patient care. I loved the patient interactions. I didn't love the daily routine of the job, because for me it was a daily routine. And I liked a little bit more diversity in my work. And so I just felt like it was the wrong path. So I changed my career at that point in time, and I went into sales from speech therapy. But I sold to therapists. So I was still kind of in my
In
circle.
that element, yes.
Yeah. And so I quickly realized I loved sales, and I was pretty good at it too. So I really thrived in that environment. I was selling splints to physical therapists, orthopedic surgeons, occupational therapists, so still in the therapy world.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going into patients' homes, and I'm fitting them in their homes, which got a little bit creepy at times. And so from there, I then made the jump into pharmaceutical sales.
What was your territory at the beginning that you used to work when you first started with the splints?
It was Gainesville, Ocala, Lake City, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, part of Jacksonville. So it was north central Florida.
So you were on the road a lot going
Yes.
from, that's...
And I would go into people's homes,
Yeah.
which sounds fun, but not
No,
always great.
My wife spent a number of years as an at-home nurse,
Mm-hmm.
and it always scared me that she was going into houses like that all the day, especially in the winter months when it get dark at 4:30 and you had to see so many patients a day, and if they got backed up, you were seeing a patient at 5:30, 5:45, and you never know what's going on. So that that's it is a little creepy on that. How did you get caught into not caught, but wrapped up into the pharmaceutical world? That jump, it seems like it's a normal jump, but it's not.
It wasn't too far off. I was already in the medical industry doing patient care. I understood the need for patient care and how to work in a medical environment. I knew a lot of the lingo. And now that I had sales experience, I had a proven track record in sales. So that leap wasn't too tough. And pharmaceutical companies give you a ton of training. So once I made the leap, I went through, I believe it was 8 weeks of home study and then 4 weeks of formal training in New York. And you're there for 4 weeks straight. You don't come home. So you're well trained. And you have to be, because when you come out of that, you have to be able to talk to a customer that is much more educated than you.
Yeah.
And so if you have any doubt in your mind that you could do it, you were just eaten alive. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it was just,
reality.
It's a sophisticated customer, and you're going into their world, trying to talk their language, and so you have to be on your game.
Wow. Okay. So sophisticated customer. Why are they so sophisticated in that world? Why did you choose that word to describe those individuals?
Sure. So no matter the specialty, no matter what the office was, that particular individual that you're talking to did not just do 4 years or 10 years of experience, or many of them did 4 years of undergrad, 4 years of medical school, several years of residency, several years of fellowship. They are experts in what they do. They have more training in that field than most fields that we work in. And so just even coming out of their fellowship or out of their training period, the amount of information that's in their brain is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to retain the information blew my mind.
Yeah.
So I would go through a crash course of a month of learning one disease state and the therapies that can apply to that one disease state. And I would walk in and talk to a customer, a physician, and they not only knew that disease state, but hundreds of others, right? So it just always blew my mind. The sophistication is a word that I would use, because their ability to craft all that information in their mind, bring it together on the spot, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I wasn't trying to put you on the spot with with that either, because my thought on that too is that those individuals, even with all of that knowledge, still expand their knowledge every single day. They work to learn more. They have to keep up, and really a step ahead of you. You know, they have to keep up with everything.
Yeah.
And so they're constantly in a learning mode. And, you know, and as we talk about leadership, and that's something that you and I mentioned before we went on the air here, is when you look at corporate America and medical America, if we can just separate them, because they're both corporate America, but if we can separate that a little bit, if people in corporate America worked as hard to stay ahead of the competition or to stay ahead of the content as the people in medical America, I think we'd be better off. Your thoughts?
Well, I think they're different animals.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about taking care of people's health. So there's an expectation that's built into that your doctor has to have the most up-to-date information, because that's the market that they live in. If you're a director of an organization in XYZ company, who's really holding you accountable for that same level of learning? So I think there's a little bit of a difference in terms of the expectation. However, what you bring up, I think, is brilliant, in that you and I think, do share this as well, is I'm a big fan of the growth mindset concept.
Mm-hmm.
And today what I'm hearing, especially during this time of a lot of turnover, resignation, hiring challenges, that having a growth mindset, showing up, saying, I'm going to figure this out, I'm going to learn, I'm going to grow, I think that is part of the solution of what we're starting to see in some of the corporate cultures,
Mm-hmm.
to help drive some of the innovation that they need.
Somebody asked me a question a couple of weeks ago, that why did the baby boomer generation and the quote-unquote greatest generation ever, the generation before them, why did they spend so much, learning? What was that incredible learning growth that the younger generation today is not grabbing onto? First of all, I'm not sure that that's true. I mean, the younger generation has got tools at their fingertips that they can multitask that we were never able to do when I was young. One of the things that I said to this individual was, I had 3 channels to watch on television. I had ABC, NBC, and CBS. If I didn't like what was on, there was no thing called a recorder. You couldn't record a television show. There was no cable.
No YouTube.
No YouTube. No Netflix. I listen to people talk. That in classes, in meetings I go to, especially like you're a keynote speaker, you get out and give talks. I do that. When I'm not talking and we're on break, waiting for something to happen, I listen to what's being talked about at the tables, in the chairs, out by the coffee machine. It's all about television shows. And I even had an HR director say to me the other day, he said, well, Bob, I need to watch those shows because I need to be in touch with what people are doing. And I told him, I said, you need to change their thought process to level them up here. And he he just didn't agree with that. But, it's amazing what we fill our heads with today.
We do. And I think there's part of that just wanting to connect and having some common ground, which is never a bad thing, right? To be able to connect with your teams or your customers. But I do believe that there is a level of just silence that can really benefit us. Maybe reading or asking questions, like asking a lot of questions.
I'm hooked on Audible.
Right? Audible, yeah. Asking questions and just listening to what people, and listening with your eyes as well, just watching, observing. So I think this probably comes from my sales background. Is one of the things I was taught very early in sales is about observation. Oh. You walk into a room, you look around, and you see
what's on their wall, what's important to them.
Yeah, absolutely, because that will tell you more than just one question. That will tell you volumes of information that you can do to make connections. And as human beings, we ultimately want to make connections. That's what
and
drives
it's not
us.
manipulation.
No.
I never looked upon it that way. I sold advertising in the radio business for 30 years. And I can remember walking into a high-end jewelry store. I finally got a meeting with the individual that owned the store. And I noticed it was in Ocala, on his credenza, there was an LSU picture of their football team, and I saw that he graduated from LSU. And so I discussed that with him, but I didn't do it from a standpoint of I'm manipulating him for this. Just curiosity. Yeah. What was it like going to school there in Baton Rouge? What was that like?
I actually noticed earlier you had a Detroit Lions Cup.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So I
Detroit kid.
Yeah. I saw that.
Yeah, we haven't won since 1957, and I was 2.
Yeah. Well,
it's been a long time, rolling back to when we were talking about the Netflix, and you said we use those things to connect. Let me offer another thought. Why do we connect at the lowest common denominator? Why don't we, to use one of your former company names, why don't we elevate people to an area to connect at another floor? Think of a hotel. Everybody wants to connect in the lobby. Why don't we connect in the suites in the restaurant on the 105th floor? Why do we connect at the lowest level?
I think it's easy. It's like low-lying fruit almost. It's easy to connect around, hey, what TV show, do you like? Or what's your favorite sports team? Or what do you like to do as a hobby? I think those are easy topics to make connections with. And I do believe that we are driven by, humans are driven by emotions. So when we feel that connection, that incites us to connect further. And that way, that's how we really elevate that interaction. But I think the easy place to start are the common topics.
So what I'm hearing you say is it's okay to start there, but if you live there, you're never going to make it to where your dreams might want to go.
Yeah. Well, I think it's all about the authenticity of wanting to learn, right? So we talked about observing things and manipulation. Is it, what is it? Well, it's not manipulation if you're truly interested. And I think that's kind of what separates it. So individuals that connect, we've all met people who ask us questions and are very social, and they ask us questions about, what we like to do, but then it stops there. Versus those that are truly interested to make connections, to elevate the relationship, those are the ones that we end up having, really authentic connections with.
When we come back from break, I want to go back to that and spend some time on what the leadership role is in that area. One of the talks that I'm working on, I always try to come up with a talk that's based on a thought process. And one of those is where you look, you go. And so that's something that kind of plays into what you just said. So we're going to take a break here. We're coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. My name is Bob Ganzak. This is Vicki Guy. This is MotivationU the Podcast. We'll be back in a moment.
We still hear it. The sound of victory. The joy of being part of something great. And while things may not be the same right now, we haven't gone anywhere. If you bleed orange and blue, then Meldon Law is the firm for you.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Steve Spurrier here. You know, making a reservation at my restaurant is easier than a Saturday afternoon homecoming game against Vandy. You don't have to call or email. Just go to spurriers.com, hit the reservation button, pick a date, a number of guests, and a time. It's so simple, I can do it. In fact, I just did. Maybe I'll see you tonight.
Hello, I'm Bob Ganzak, and this is MotivationU the Podcast. Welcome back. My guest today is Vicki Guy. We're talking leadership. You know, another great example of what that concept of this program is that I still think some of the best leaders we have are living next door to us. There are people that are running Dollar Generals or Kilwins or whatever. You don't have to be a Musk or a Gates or a Buffett in order to be a great leader. You can motivate people and change their life at a local. I just had a friend of mine, Bruce Bittenbender, retire after, I think it was 52 years as a wrestling coach at a high school in Michigan. And he stayed because he could never find that individual to replace him. Mm-hmm. And he finally found that person. And so that leadership succession process is important. So welcome back.
Thank you.
We were talking about that growth area and finding that common denominator, that lower level. Whose responsibility? Again, I mentioned you, one of these talks I'm working on is Where You Look, You Go. That came from motorcycle class. I bought a motorcycle after 9/11. I was scared to death of motorcycles. I bought one, and I had not taken a class yet. I jumped on my motorcycle in Ocala, went riding through the horse farms and everything, and all of a sudden I was deathly afraid I was going to fall. And after I took the class, I knew why, because the instructor told us, where you look, you go. Mm-hmm. And I was looking straight down, and I was going to fall. And life is like that. So when we start, connecting with people on that bottom level, whose responsibility is it, and how do you look to that higher level to get both of you there or get your team there?
That's a big, chunky question, Bob. Really chunky. I think ultimately the responsibility is our own. But I think we've created a problem.
Okay.
I think we've created, especially in corporate settings, we have spoon-fed a lot of resources and information, and even in a generation. And I don't really subscribe to a lot of the generational myths, but one thing I do know is that the generation that's entered into the workforce now, the generation, what is it, Z?
Z, yes.
Generation Z, and to some degree the millennial generation, because Generation X we grew up, when I say we, I'm in Generation X. I think you are too.
Boomer.
Okay. And Boomer generation, we grew up having to work at a different level. You know, we didn't, like you mentioned before, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all the things at our fingertips, so we had to go find them. And I think that the generations that are coming into the workplace now, for a long time, things have just come into their frame easier. And it's not necessarily their fault, it's just the way the culture has evolved. And I think coming into corporations that way, there's that expectation that things should be provided. So I think there's a struggle right now within corporations, and I know I'm working with a couple clients right now that are struggling with exactly this thing, is how do we flip the script to put the ownership on the individual in terms of how they drive their own growth versus them waiting for somebody to give it to them or jumping ship thinking something better is out there than where they are today.
Is it too late?
I don't think so. I think that there is a revolution that is happening in front of our eyes. A couple of years ago, I went to a conference and I heard a guy talk about the purpose generation. I think what's happening is we're finding that it's not all bad. What people really are looking for and what they're looking to get now is really more about how they fit into the company, the culture. Okay. Are they making a difference? And I think when we find that we can optimize talent to match that within the company culture, we actually can provide the motivation that matches the purpose, and that drives people to want to learn.
You know, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, and we're going to come back to that in a second. But, you know, if you want to ask a question of Vicki, you can just write into Facebook Live, right into the comment section, and Evan will get us the question if you do have a question. And this podcast is available 39 different places. Why that number sticks in my mind, Evan, I have no idea. And I'm talking to our producer, Evan Miller. But it's on Spotify, it's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, it's on Apple, it's iHeart, it's on
everywhere.
And on and on and on.
It's everywhere.
So a lot of people can get to that. Going back to what you were talking about, if psychologists, which they say that a lot of our life path is built in that 3 to 6 year, when we're 3 to 6 years old. And then you and I, Dale Carnegie gets students with 18, 20, 30, 40. How do you shift that thinking if they didn't have that thought process instilled to them as a child?
I think it's all about the right match. So everybody has their own core values. Everybody shows up with their own belief system. And I'm not a psychologist, but I've read the same stuff. That's created when we were really young. I don't know that we can change that. I think what we can do is do a better job of finding the right fit. So what I mean by that is as we're bringing people into our companies, bringing people into our teams, or we have people on our teams, in either situation, making sure that we can do whatever we can to find that they're in the right place that can showcase what they're good at and what they believe in. Whether that's the company, the position, the team. I personally believe that most people start a job and they say, I want to do really good here. I want to do good things. I want to be a rock star in this area. I don't know many people that start a job and go, God, I hope I can just be average. you know?
Hey, my goal is mediocrity.
Exactly, exactly. So I do believe that most people start things with the intention of success. And I also have seen where we sometimes we hire people, we promote people, we bring in people into a team, and then we kind of crush their souls a little bit by telling them what to do, how to do it, when to do it on our terms.
Yeah.
And so I think that what we can do is we can't change people, but we can change the approach and how we're matching the people to the right space and in the right role. And I think when we are able to do that, which is not easy, so I'm not saying that's an easy task, but when we can do that, then I think we have a better chance of people shining that align with what they believe in.
You said something there. All relationships are kind of like that. I mean, I think of marriage too. Is that's kind of like that. You like somebody for who they are. You get to the point of loving that person for who they are. Then it seems like as soon as you get married, you try to change them.
It happens a lot, doesn't it?
All the time, right? And we do the same thing in business. You interview somebody. You like what you see from them, and then when you hire them, all of a sudden you say, okay, round peg, I'm going to put you over here in this square hole, and you're going to have to work in there and make it happen.
Yeah.
I don't fit there.
Yeah.
That's just an interesting thing. And go ahead.
Yeah, I talk about that all the time in the work that I do with some of my clients. We talk about delegation or the value system of the organization. And those two areas are really good opportunities for leaders to make sure that there's a good fit. I also work with Predictive Index. Hope you don't mind me bringing that up.
That's
but
all right.
Predictive Index is a software that helps organizations do that, to be able to match the talent with what's happening in the organization. And I find that when there's tools like that that are used, and then the conversations happen between the leaders and how we match the skills, it's a beautiful thing. On the other side, we do what you just said, and we tell people what to do, and then we wonder why there's so much turnover.
Yep.
The recent benchmarking survey from Predictive Index shows that turnover, like 1 out of 5 people in the last 6 months have left their job, and on average it's about $11,000 per person that it costs the company. So it's not just about do we want people to be happy, but for business it's bad. It's a bad decision.
It is.
So we can do better.
When we talk about employee engagement, Dale Carnegie Training did a study a number of years ago. A lot of companies did, but we partnered with another group to do a study on employee engagement. And when it comes back, the research shows that there are 3 things that really drive engagement, and your relationship with your immediate supervisor, your pride in the organization, and your belief in senior leadership.
So true.
And when you think about that, it goes back to what you were saying, is these people don't come in with the thought processes, I'm coming here to be mediocre. But because of their relationship with that individual, when we start talking about different generations too, the same thing. A lot of people, I was given a talk one time, and as I was listening to the people in the room, this was in Jacksonville, I said, I just realized something. I'm a millennial in a baby boomer's body. I like what you're saying. That's the world that I would love to live in. And people have asked me, I'm very fortunate that my 2 kids I have 7 step kids who are extremely successful also, but I wasn't around them when they were little. But my 2 kids, people ask me, what did Matt and Becca get when they were younger? And their mother and I believed in curiosity. We want our kids to be curious. Again, going back to what you were talking about, we didn't have things at our fingertips. Yeah. The internet was just starting to come out a little bit down the road there. We would go to an encyclopedia that might be 10 years old. Populations have changed in whatever country that you're looking up in that time. So I always felt it was important to teach your children to be curious.
There's a huge body of work that was done by Carol Dweck around, she coined the term, I believe, growth mindset, and it actually started with school children. So elementary school age children her study was done to see how much curiosity played a role in their success later in life. And there is a huge link. And so now this whole growth mindset
See, I've
discussion.
never even heard of that, so I've never
Oh,
even read that.
you would love it.
And this, my kids were born in 1983 and 85, so I mean that's a long time ago. We just decided you're going to give them love, try to help them believe in themselves, and teach them to be curious. And just because somebody tells you something, it's okay to ask why. And as parents, sometimes we don't like that. Do this. Why?
But why?
Well, I've got to figure out some different way. That's why the Dale Carnegie course really changed my life. I wish I would have gone through it 10 years earlier. I did in 1992. I wish it would have been 10 years earlier before my children were born, because there's a leadership principle, ask questions instead of giving direct orders, which after that part, I got less wise because I was asking the question. And it's hard when somebody asks you a question, say why. It's difficult, but very interesting. There was something we were talking about earlier that we said we were going to come back and visit, and I mentioned you try to remember that.
Was it about authenticity in leadership or in?
See,
Yeah, I don't.
I forget. Let's talk about the authenticity.
Yeah.
What is your thought process in that realm of leadership where you have to be authentic? You can't be something you're not.
Sure. Well, I think it's everything. I think people ask me sometimes, what makes a great leader? And I think Daniel Goleman wrote a book about that, just with that title, What Makes a Great Leader, or The Makings of a Great Leader. And I always say there's not one thing except the fact, just be real, like be who you are. Because when you start trying to figure out how to do something that's not the way you are, people see through that, and it just comes across in such a toxic way.
Yes, it does.
It's hard to really make connections. It's hard to build trust. It's hard to do any of those things that we know make a successful team. So it doesn't really matter what our personality type is. It doesn't really matter what our leadership style is, as long as it's authentic. Now, not everybody will mesh with our leadership style or our personality style, but those that do will know it's real. And so I think that's just always a good place to start.
Why is it that so many people that get elevated to a role of leadership think they have to be somebody else at that point?
I don't know that I've seen that.
Okay.
I think that there is a desire to have a persona that's big and bold and risky sometimes, like the leader that is this big personality. I think sometimes there is a focus on getting there, but I think a lot of successful people have realized that you don't need that to be an effective leader.
Which is true.
Yeah.
My point is, so many people that get elevated all of a sudden change their thought process because, now I'm leader, I've got to think differently.
Yeah.
Where they don't realize it's what you did getting to this point that let somebody else see in you that you had the leadership skills to lead our team.
Yeah, and I think I remember now what we were going to talk about.
Okay.
Because I was thinking earlier about a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall Goldsmith. I don't know if you've ever read the book, but it's a good one. And it really is. I use it a lot when I'm coaching people because they're like, well, I was promoted to this role and I was doing great things and I've been successful and I'm doing this, but now I'm stuck. And it always comes back to, are you doing the same things that you've always done to get where you are, or are you curious about what you can do differently? And I think there's a tipping point there that opens the door to learning and growing and failing at something that you've never thought you could do, or maybe you will try to do, and maybe you'll succeed, maybe not. But we learn from those failures or those successes.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
We do. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Marshall Goldman book. 1982, date myself here, went to work for a broadcast company. And we had a gentleman his name was passed away a couple of years ago, Phil Fisher, who was so far ahead of his time and outside of the realm of anything sales. And what he did is he created for us a video where we would carry this big pack VHS, portable VHS out to our clients and show them this video that was highly produced about, the gambling of advertising, how it's a roll of the dice and how you could break down some of that. And we were having a discussion one day, and I vividly remember this to the day. And I said to him, I said, Phil, it's the old story that whatever took you to get you where you are is no longer good enough to keep you there, And we put that into part of what we did at that time. And it was just a conversation. And to me, that has always, way I've, if I played baseball, if I played sports or whatever it was, whatever I did to get me to this point is not good enough to keep me here. Somebody is nipping at my heels.
Yeah.
And that's the same thought process of what you're saying.
Yeah.
How do we get to that next level?
In terms of
leadership.
Oh, I think it's, I don't have the exact formula for that. I think it's a combination of individualism. I think personally I'm wired to always want to do better.
Mm-hmm.
I think some people are just naturally wired that way. I think some people have good mentors that push them toward
yes.
the growth. I think some people, things have always come really easy, and then maybe they're motivated by a challenge, and then when they come up against something that's not easy, they're motivated by figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's different for everybody. As long as there's something, I think, that gets us moving in the direction, if that's where we want to go. Some people are really happy with status quo, and that's okay too. I think it's really just an individual preference.
Do you think everybody has a rut they get into? Does Elon Musk have a rut that he gets into?
Actually, I don't hope so. I shouldn't say that. I think everybody does have a rut, and so what I'm saying is I'm hoping he's human, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's how long we stay in that rut. That's important.
I know, I feel it when I get into one, and I've tried to figure out how to get out of it, and that's kind of going back to that thing that I mentioned about Netflix a while ago. If you're going to sit on the couch, 20 hours a day and watch Netflix, unless you're in the television producing world or something that has to do with that you're studying that for a reason, you're in a rut. And there's not a lot of opportunity for growth outside of that if you get to that point. Mm-hmm. Just personal opinion on that. I'm not sure. But I've always wondered if, people like Elon Musk, if they get into a rut and what it looks like, And is their rut, my pantheon?
Right, right. I don't know that we'll ever know the answer to that question, but I'm pretty sure everybody has to go through some, everyone struggles in their own way, and everybody works through their own stuff. Everybody has stuff. Our problems are different, and our ruts are different, but I'm sure that everybody goes through it.
I had a conversation with a graduate. I wasn't his instructor. Mm-hmm. He took our program over in Jacksonville. He had a different one of our instructors that was his instructor. But he and I had a long conversation on the phone the other day, and I said to him, isn't it amazing that 30 different people can go through that program that have 30 different goals, one curriculum, and everybody accomplishes what they wanted out of it with 30 different paths? And the reason I say that is that when we look at leadership and the world that is out there, there are so many avenues to get to leadership. You don't have to be born a leader, because I don't believe in that standpoint myself. But there's different paths to get there, and we all take teachers, coaches, people that influenced me. A huge influence in my life was Dick Vitale. My 4 years at the University of Detroit coincided with his 4 years. I played baseball there. he was the basketball coach and the athletic director. He loved baseball, so we interacted a lot, the team and him. And he was very influential with the enthusiasm that he had. He just, every day, it was just total enthusiasm. And when I get into a rut, I try to get out of it by enthusiasm.
Yeah.
So it's a huge challenge from that. Where do you see leadership going in the future? You know.
Well, I do believe that the purpose generation, so to speak, is going to continue to drive decisions. And I think it's actually it's an exciting thing. I think if we all align with purpose to make ourselves, our companies, our planet, everything better, I think that's a great place to be.
Yes.
I do worry about accountability a little bit. That's a topic that comes up quite often in terms of, okay, well, this aspirational, purpose-driven leadership, where's the accountability for results? And so I'm starting to hear a little bit of a dichotomy between those two topics. And I don't know if that's going to have an impact, but I'm hearing it quite a bit. So where it goes from here, I think it really depends on, I think it's the individuals. We have now more generations in the workplace than ever before. We still have, baby boomers working
Still.
right in the workplace.
Still.
And will continue to work in the workplace for a number of years. And then we have this new generation that there's
Z,
actually beyond Z I can't remember that there's another name now for the next generation, but I think we're going to see an influx of the value system shift as the generations move and as intellectual capacity, like intellectual knowledge, is transferred from one generation to the other. I think it's going to be shaped in a different way. I don't know what it's going to look like. Marcus Buckingham? He does some work around the love of work, and there's a lot of noise right now about loving what you do. Who doesn't want to love what they do, right? But our generations, we had to not only love what we do, but we had to make sure that we could pay the bills.
Yes.
That's not necessarily the main driver that's coming into focus. So I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm excited to see where it does.
When did accountability become a bad word? Because when I was a kid, we kind of held ourselves accountable. We expected it, I guess, and it was something that I don't know. I mean, I needed to be someplace at a certain time because somebody was counting on me. That was accountability, and I wanted to do that. And nowadays, the word accountability. I'd like to have you back in a couple of weeks.
Sure.
Because we've talked about so many topics that I'd like to go into. I'd like to go into social media, and
oh boy.
Because when you were talking earlier, the first thought that came to my mind is, when we start talking about different generations, they think that everybody has this great life. Like we were talking about Elon Musk's rut. Well, nobody ever puts their negative stuff on Instagram. They don't put the picture of their bad hair day. They put the picture of when they're looking perfect, right? People don't, and we've created this culture where we're looking at I want to be like that. Where I'm like, be the best version of you.
Yeah.
If you're always looking where you look, you go, right? If you're always looking at somebody else, you're going to be a carbon copy of them or a poor copy of yourself because you're not that individual.
Yeah. And I always personally, to that point, if I'm going to look for someone to be around, I'm going to look for those people that I want to be like in the future, and try to spend my time with them and learn from what they're doing, because then I'm looking toward where I want to go. And I think it's about who you spend your time with as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what your purpose is. Oh, we have so much more to
So
talk
much to
about. We'll come back in a couple of weeks, okay?
All right. Sounds good.
Next week, Tim Montgomery will be here, the famous athlete, sprinter. He's going to be in our studio here at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill to talk about his journey of leadership, challenge, and overcoming some things. Awesome show. Tim Montgomery. Look him up on Wikipedia. see a great athlete, and has achieved great things from overcoming some very tough times. So, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill at Celebration Point inside the Coach's Podcast Room. Please come on out and join us sometime. Great food, awesome restaurant, incredible ambiance. For my good friend, Evan Miller, our producer. For our guest today, Vicki Guy. Thank you again, Vicki.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Ganzak, and this is MotivationU the Podcast.